Okay. Hi everyone, my name's Lorna Dawson. I'm the health literacy specialist in the regional health literacy team. And this is our bite-sized session on how to write simply. So what I'll be covering is what health literacy is, so a quick recap, how to plan your writing, or what to think about before you start writing, how to write simply, and also how to check the reading age of your writing. So how to check how simply you've written your information. So first of all, what is health literacy? There are lots of definitions of health literacy, and this is just one of them. It's from the World Health Organization, and they say that health literacy is about being able to access, understand, check, and use information to make choices about health. So it's about being able to get hold of information in the first place, whether it's from your GP, whether it's online, from an app. Then it's about being able to understand that information, so understanding the words and numbers on the page, what they mean. It's being able to check whether that information is reliable, whether it's trustworthy, in date, and then using that to make some sort of choice. And it could be the choice to have a life-changing operation, or it could be the choice of kind of what foods to put on your shopping list. So what percentage of adults are affected? So not everybody kind of has those skills to be able to do all those different things. And actually, it's about 62% of adults in the northeast of England who struggle to understand health information that contains words and numbers. And this is worse than the England average. So the England average is about 58%. And this means 62% of people in the Northeast might struggle to understand the labels on food, so those traffic light labels, or their GP appointment letter. To be able to read that health information, you need a reading age of about 9 to 11, and that's about the average reading age in England. But we don't write like that. We gave people in our local area leaflets that we'd written without thinking about that reading age of 9 to 11. And these are the kind of things that they said about them. They said they were daunting, that the information sends you into a panic, that it would scare them, and that big block of text in the middle, that would stop me from coming back. And it's crazy to think that things as simple as words on a page can actually affect people turning up to appointments and getting the care that they need, but they really do. And in fact, low health literacy has a lot of impact on people's health. And it's not just kind of like people or adults themselves, it's also their children and families, the people they care for. They have some of the worst health in society. So that's things like they're more likely to die younger of preventable diseases. They're more likely to have long-term conditions, and those long-term conditions are more likely to be limiting. They're more likely to have kind of worse health behaviours. So things like problem drinking, more likely to smoke, have a poor diet, and less likely to have healthy behaviours. So things like good exercise routine, healthy diet. Um, they also have a lower response to public healthy living campaigns. So things like screening, immunisation for children. It's harder for them to kind of do self-care if they're struggling to understand information about what to do. Also more likely to take medications wrong, which can have some really serious consequences. So what can we do about all that? So I said that the average reading age is about 9 to 11, and it would be great if we could go out to individuals and communities and help raise that average reading age. But that's really hard to do. Um, we're living in a cost of living crisis. People are making choices around whether they can kind of put the heating on or put food on the table. They don't have time to go out to like an adult skills class or a literacy or numeracy class. Um, But as organizations, we have control over the words that we say and the words that we write. So we know that the average reading age is 9 to 11, and we have the power and the skills to be able to write at that level. So that's what we're encouraging you to do. And we'll kind of explain how we can do that. So we have a really useful acronym to help you think about how to make your writing simpler and get more towards writing at that reading age of 9 to 11. And it is called Talk to Betty from Bolden. But before you talk to Betty, what we tell people is have a think about what you want to say to Betty and what Betty might want to hear before you actually talk or write to her. So before you actually put pen to paper or start typing away, have a think about who you're talking to. So imagine a patient who really doesn't want to engage, kind of somebody who has loads of stress going on in their lives, who's got two jobs, is trying to make ends meet. They really hated English at school. They don't particularly like reading. That is the person who is most likely to be affected by low health literacy. But actually, a lot of us have a lot of things going on in our lives. That is the person that you're writing to. So kind of keep that in mind. Person who doesn't have time to read reams and reams of information. That is who you are writing to. Then think about what do they need to know. So what are the absolute musts, the information that you really need to get across? Usually this is what people need to do. Also have a think about what they don't need to know. So we're helpful people. We want to help people out by giving them lots of information. But really kind of people don't have time for all that nice to know stuff. If it's nice to know, but people don't need to know it, it should probably go because people just don't have the time and the headspace for that extra information that they don't need. Also, it's really good to go out and ask people what they want to know if you can. So we assume that we know what people want to know, but actually people might come up with surprising things. So if you can, go check with your audience first, kind of what would you like to know in this situation? Because they might come up with some surprising stuff. But yeah, I guess the key thing is what are the essentials that they need to know, and don't kind of overwhelm them. We do a lot of talking to communities, and these are the kind of things that people say. So they say, like, does it need to be done? That's the most important thing. So yeah, what do I need to do? And then they also say things like, I want to know things that relate to me. I want to know how long the scar is going to be after the operation, but not how big the tube is going to be. So think less about, I want to say this to a person. Think, I'm this person. What information do I need to know? Yeah, so put yourself in that kind of the audience's shoes or Betty's shoes. Okay, so you've had a bit of a think about what you want to say. And what you would love to say, but that they don't need to know. So now we're going to actually start writing that. And we're going to talk to Betty or write to Betty. And Betty is an acronym for useful tips when you're writing to make sure your writing is simple. So B stands for break it down. E is for everyday words. T is for talk to a friend. The second T is take stuff out. And then Y is you, we, and I. So I'm just going to kind of take each letter in turn and give a few examples of how you do that. So B is for break it down. What do we mean by that? So we mean things like one idea per sentence. So short sentences, less than kind of 2 lines or 20 words long. We'd say less than 15 really. then one like topic per paragraph. So we had that quote of that big block of text that would stop me from coming back. We want to kind of break those paragraphs up so they're in bite-sized chunks and it's a lot easier on the eye, and for people who are reading it's a lot less overwhelming. We also say try and keep your paragraphs no more than 4 sentences long. So if it's gone on to 4 lines or more, it's probably getting a bit long there. And also add headings if they help. I'll give you a few more tips about adding headings, but these just break information down even more and help people to scan the information and get to the bit that they need quickly. When we applied those kind of like 3 simple rules to writing, people noticed. They said that the information, when we wrote it at reading age of 9 to 11 and you talked to Betty, they said it's broken down more. And they said it's got questions that you'd normally ask and then answers them. So that's one of our tips about headings. If you try and make them into questions, people really like that. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of how to kind of shorten your sentences and break things down. These little numbers on the left and right hand side are Flesch Kincaid reading grades. So they're based on the American school system. We're aiming for a reading grade of 6, which is about 11 years old. So we can see this sentence: when the kidneys are not working normally, this waste and extra fluid is not removed and can build up in your blood. That's got a reading grade of 8, so it's a bit high. And what we're trying to do is have one idea per sentence. So we've got kind of like 2 ideas there. We've got kind of like when the kidneys aren't working normally, this is what happens. So the waste and extra fluid is not removed. So that's one idea. And we can put a full stop there. And then the next idea is, well, what does that cause? So it can build up in your blood, all that waste. So I guess a tip is to kind of look for words like and or but, kind of connecting words, and you can usually swap those for a full stop and tweak your sentence slightly, and change that into 2 sentences. And just by adding that full stop, the reading grade has gone down to 3.7, so massively below where we'd want it to be, which is good. So really simple. Another thing that we see a lot of is kind of lists just as sentences, so lots of lists of symptoms. You can imagine that comes up a lot in health information. And all we'd recommend is kind of putting that list as a bullet pointed list rather than in a sentence, because it's so much easier for people to pick out their symptoms. So, got this can make you feel unwell and give you symptoms such as feeling sick, being sick, and not feeling hungry. So again, we can kind of apply both of those rules there. So this can make you feel unwell. That's one idea. So that's how it makes you feel. And then what does it do? So it can give you symptoms such as, and then a bullet pointed list. Point feeling sick, point being sick, point not feeling hungry. And the reading grade there has gone down from 6.9 to 0.5. So really easy for people to digest and pick out very quickly if they are feeling those different things. So we've got kind of a big block of text here that someone said might stop them from coming back. And I'm not quite sure how many sentences this is, but it's quite long and it's kind of, yeah, going along a long way. So what we would recommend is breaking this up into kind of separate paragraphs and adding some headings to make it easier to digest. So here we've got the first half of the paragraph is really talking about, so this was from a leaflet on low clearance. So it's talking about what low clearance is. So it's when the kidneys aren't working normally, and waste products build up in the blood. And then it's talking about the symptoms. So it can give you all these different symptoms. one of the comments said that they liked the questions. So with your headings, we always try and, or as much as we can, we try and put them as questions, because those are the kind of things that your reader will be thinking in the backs of their mind. So they're probably asking themselves these questions. What does that mean? Like, what are the symptoms? What are the side effects? So wherever possible, try and put those headings as questions. Headings are really simple, but really helpful because they help people scan to the bit of information that they want. People don't read all of the leaflet, so they just skip to the bit that they want, and headings are really helpful in getting people to the information that they need fast. Okay, so we've done break it down. Now we're going to move on to everyday words. So, what are everyday words? Sounds really simple. Sometimes it can be harder to think of them than you think. So, everyday words are normally shorter, so kind of 3 beats or less. Um, what we say is like try and use as few medical words as possible or as little jargon as you can. So this could be your corporate jargon, your legal jargon, or your medical jargon, whatever your kind of jargon is. Try and use that as little as possible because people aren't necessarily from your kind of part of the world or like sphere. They don't necessarily use those words every day. Sometimes when you swap jargon for kind of more everyday words, you'll end up having to use a phrase rather than just a word. And I've got some examples soon. Sometimes you have to use jargon. If you do, we recommend putting the simple word first and then the hard word in brackets. Um, we say that because if you put kind of the jargon first, even if the simple word is after, people might switch off before they get to the simple explanation. Whereas if you put the simple word first, people will be like, right, okay, I get that. And then you come to the jargon and it's like, oh, I might also hear it like this. If you have to use acronyms, so like PPE, for example, personal protective equipment, put the word first and then the acronym kind of after in brackets. And you can keep using the acronym after that, but you need to explain it first. And again, when we showed people leaflets where we'd use the Betty principles, they said, I like the words. I like that instead of saying flatulence, it says fart. And people aren't interested in jargon, they just want to know what's wrong. Um, so here are some examples. So instead of saying fatigue, you can use something like feeling tired. Um, that's an example of a word being turned into like a more everyday phrase. Instead of henceforth, you could use from now on. Instead of assist, you could say help. And instead of kind of BMI, you could say body mass index and then put the BMI in brackets. It's easy when we have picked out the hard words for you, but sometimes it can be hard, particularly in your own writing, to spot your own hard words. So I've got a sentence here. And I'm just going to show kind of where the hard words might be. So think about things like words that are 3 beats or longer, things that might sound a bit kind of corporate, or things that might be jargony that not everybody might know. So we've got to help minimize the risk of developing a wound infection following surgery. You'll be given intravenous antibiotics for 24 hours after surgery. So here I've just highlighted the more complex words. So minimize, minimize, 3 syllables. We've got developing, developing is 4, and then following, and also probably the intravenous antibiotics are definitely kind of medical jargon. So not everybody might know what intravenous means. And then what I've done is just change them. So instead of saying to help minimize, I'd said to help lower. And then instead of saying developing, we've said getting. And then instead of like following, you can use after. You'll be given intravenous antibiotics as changed to you'll be given antibiotics through a vein. So it's a lot clearer, kind of, and simpler and more every day what's happening. The first T in Betty is talk to a friend. An advice we give is imagine that you're explaining something to a friend who doesn't have the same background as you. I think when we're in our own setting, we think that everybody understands, but they don't necessarily. So imagine you're kind of in a coffee shop and explaining to a friend. We say be warm and friendly. You can give kind of important information in a friendly way. Try not to make it seem kind of cold. And also avoid corporate and complicated language because you probably wouldn't use like massively corporate or complicated language with your friend. A lot of people worry that when we use Talk to Betty and when we write at a reading age of 9 to 11, it'll sound patronizing. But actually, people said it sounds more human. And speaking more normally means I'm more likely to ask questions, which is really important for things like person-centered care and shared decision making. So I've just got a few genuine sentences from information that we've given out. Um, and I'd like you to think about how would you say this to a friend? So we carry out a comprehensive bladder and bowel assessment to develop an individual treatment program agreed with you and your child in order for them to reach their full potential of continence. So yeah, there's no way that you'd say that to a friend. You might say something like, "Oh, we're going to do like a full test, and then we're going to kind of like make a plan. We'll agree it with you and your child to help to help you with going to the toilet." Yes, that sounds a lot more every day. And then we've got, it's vitally important we learn from such incidents in order to mitigate recurrence. So something bad's happened. So it's really important that we learn from this to make sure it doesn't happen again. Great. So the second T in Talk to Betty is take stuff out. And I know I said kind of before in that planning stage when we're thinking about writing, you need to think about things that Betty doesn't need to know and take those out. So I know this is repeating itself, but I'd say take stuff out at the beginning. You'll still find more stuff to take out after you've done some writing. Um, and what we mean when we say take stuff out is take out words that you don't need. Sometimes you'll use three or four when you could use one. Take out sentences that you don't need. Also, you might still need to take out entire paragraphs or sections. That's okay. Sometimes you need to get the ideas down before realizing actually, no, that still doesn't need to be there. And our rule of thumb is if it's nice to know, it should probably go. Only include what you absolutely need to tell somebody. And the reason we say this is because people say, I don't read all the leaflet. Um, so yeah, if you're giving people too much, they're not going to read it all. They say it's too long. I'm losing interest by the middle. And also there's too much information. There needs to be a balance. Um, so if people are losing interest by the middle, kind of, and all your important information that they really need to know is at the end, and all the information that was nice to know is at the beginning, that information isn't very useful. So you've got to assume that people don't want to read your stuff. So only include the really important stuff and the really, really important stuff. Put it as close to the beginning as you can. Because you can't guarantee that even if everything in there is essential, that people will read it cover to cover to right to the end. So here we've got kind of a long sentence talking about a class. I'm just going to show you how to cut some words out of it. So this class focuses on giving you the understanding of why you may be experiencing certain symptoms during your pregnancy and how you can effectively and confidently manage these. And we can change this class is to help you understand your symptoms and how to manage them. So really taking probably about a third, at least a half of the words out of that sentence, and the reading grade has gone down by about 2/3. This is an example of a paragraph that definitely could be shorter. So it's about kind of sending you to a slightly different hospital for support so that you don't have to wait as long. And there are a couple of sentences about the ICB and what it is. And I would say people don't really need to know about the ICB. They just want to know what's happening to them. Where are they going to go? And just to give you a visual of what this kind of thing looks like, um, so we've got kind of a similar number of paragraphs in these letters, but we take out a lot of words, a lot of chunks. It just makes it a lot easier on the eye. So the last part of Betty is you, we, and I. And by that we mean talk directly to the person. So use you, we, and I instead of words like the patient or the doctor. It makes it a lot more friendly, a lot more approachable. Um, so ways to do this, look for sentences that use words like doctor, nurse, or staff, so job titles, and see if you can change those to things like we or they. Then look for sentences that say things like patient or visitor or client, and see if you can change these to you. So kind of really simple changes that make a massive difference to tone. So instead of saying something like staff will wear disposable aprons and gloves, you can say we will wear disposable aprons and gloves. Instead of saying a ward nurse will take your child to theatre, you can say we will take your child to theatre. So that is talk to Betty. So B for break it down, use everyday words, write as if you're talking to a friend. Remember to take stuff out, things that if it's nice to know, it should probably go. And use you, we, and I. So, you've done all those things. You've followed Betty really well. How do you know whether you've reached that reading age of 9 to 11? So we talk a lot about readability. You might hear it called readability, reading grade, or reading age. But they all basically mean how easy it is to read your writing. And the real kind of in a nutshell, what you need to do and why we've kind of included some of the things in Betty are that if you have short sentences and short words, the readability is lower. So your writing is easy to read if your sentences are shorter and if your words are shorter and simpler. So we use or we measure readability using the Flesch-Kincaid reading grade, and this is available in Word. So you can always Google kind of readability in Word, and it'll give you some instructions on how to find it. Basically, the lower the score, the easier your writing is to read. Um, we aim for a reading grade of 6 or lower. So it's based on the American school grade system. And a reading grade of 6 is about 11 years old. So that's what we'd recommend you aim for. It can be really hard to work out where you need to shorten your sentences or kind of which words are like a little bit complex. So there are tools that can help you with this and to spot things. Um, we recommend using the NHS Medical Readability Tool. So we've helped design this to spot the things that we're talking or we're asking you to change using Betty. So you can copy and paste your text into it, and then it color codes words depending on kind of if the word's too long or the sentence is too complicated, and then you can change them. You'll have to change them yourself to make them simpler. But it's definitely a really useful tool, and it tells you the reading age at the top. So you can keep a track of what reading age your writing is as you change it. So thanks very much for listening to this bite-sized session. If you need help, you can get in touch with us on our email address, which is there. So stsft.nenc healthliteracy@nhs.net. Thanks.